Hi everybody, okay, welcome back. We're looking today at Jeremy Duff, Elements of New Testament Greek. We're in section 7.2 on the imperative mood. And what we've got here is some examples of how to use the imperative mood and just examples to translate it, to ingrain some of the stuff in the previous video where I went through the meaning and the form of the imperative. So if you want to go back and check out that video, click the link to the playlist in the description. Otherwise, let's crack on with these, and I'm just going to show you a few of these examples, and then when I've done this, I'll put an example up from English into Greek and we'll look at that too. Okay, so here goes. Here's the first verb, ekbale. Ekbale. Well, where does this come from? Ekbale comes from the verb ekbalo, meaning, what does that mean? It means I drive out. I drive out. Now what we've got to do is to parse it. We've got to figure out what it is, and what you'll notice is it's got this funny little ending on, ekbale. Well, that's not an indicative ending, is it? Because, well, there's no epsilon augment, no sigma suffix, so if it were indicative, it would be in the present. So you go through the present indicative, you go ekbalo, ekbale, sekbale, ekbalomen, ekbalete, ekbalusin. Well, this is ekbale. You scratch your head, you think, what on earth is this? And you think, oh yes, I did the imperatives 2 or 3 days ago, and the imperatives go lu lu ete, lu son, lu sater. We'll leave that there because that's going to come in handy. Present, aorist, singular, plural. That's going to come in handy. I'll write that in fact. There we are. Present, aorist, singular, plural. Okay, and so the ending here is the ending there. So it's a present, singular, imperative of I drive out. So how do we translate that? Well, we make it into a command. It's singular because it's addressed, which means it's addressed to one person. And so you would say, drive out. That's what it means. Obviously, it doesn't make any sense because normally that needs an object in English. But that's what it means, and it's only a practice exercise anyway. So normally you'd have an object here in the accusative, and it'd be like drive out the demon or something, giving an instruction to one person. And because it's present, there's a sense of do so continuously or do so in an ongoing way, perhaps, as distinct from the aorist, which doesn't have that flavour to it. Okay, so first one, drive out. Right, what about this one? A little more complicated. Metanoieson. Metanoieson. Well, let's first try and think. It's a verb. Which verb does it come from? Which verb does it come from? And this is where you discover whether you've really learned the vocabulary or whether you are really learning the vocabulary as you go along. This comes from the verb meta no eo, meaning I repent. Metanoeo means I repent, because look, what you've got here is meta not, and then you've got, interesting, not the epsilon. So why is that, you ask yourself? Well, let's just have a look. You've got the stem, you've got the, now we need to find out epsilon augments and sigma suffixes. You have a sigma suffix right here, you have no epsilon augment. So what you might automatically do is start thinking, oh, hold on, sigma suffix, no epsilon augment, that means it might be a future indicative, and so you go luso, luses, luce, lusomen, luseta, lususin, and you think, well, that's not any of these endings, is it? On is a different ending. So you scratch your head and you think, what kind of verb is it that has a sigma suffix, no epsilon augment, and an ending like on? And then you realise it's the aorist singular imperative. So the sigma denotes the aorist, no epsilon augment, because epsilon augments denote past time, and in the other moods, like the imperative, there's nothing about time in the difference between the tenses. Or, to put it another way, if you've only got present and aorist, you don't need an epsilon augment to distinguish them, or you need a sigma suffix to distinguish them. The aorist will have it, the present doesn't. So this is an aorist imperative. What's happened here is that this weak epsilon wants to be long. It's separated from the vowel in the ending by this sigma, so the only way to be long is to turn into the corresponding long vowel. So the epsilon turns into an eta, giving you metanoeson, the singular aorist imperative of I repent. So how would you translate that? Repent is how you translate it. An instruction that is given to one person because it's singular. So that's the second one. Repent. What about this one then? Terete ton nomon. Terete ton nomon. Let's switch, go green for a second. Now find the verb in here. Can you find the verb in here? Well, let's have a little look. Can you find the verb in here? Yes, you can. Terete, I knew you did. Terete comes from the verb tereo, meaning I keep. I keep. Now, what's gone on here? What's the tense? I'm just going to look, make sure I copied it out right. Yeah, good. Thank goodness for that. What's the tense and what is the mood of this verb? Well, here's where it gets a little bit tricky. This could be in the present tense and the indicative mood, couldn't it? Because the eo is going to produce this this diphthong in the second person plural ending. So it's like philo, philes, phile, philumen, philate, philusin, philate. This could mean you are keeping, or it could be that we have a second person plural imperative where the same thing has happened, because as you remember from the previous video, the second person plural indicative is the same as the present second plural imperative. So keep. And there's no way of distinguishing these apart from the context. No way at all. You'd have to look in the context to distinguish whether it meant you are keeping or keep. But it is quite clear, of course, that the object that you're supposed to keep is ton nomon, so the law. So this either means you are keeping the law or it means keep the law. And this is one thing to highlight, which this example draws our attention to. The second plural indicative looks the same as the present, in the present tense, looks the same as the present second person imperative. Context was all the difference. By the way, I know I'm now calling these imperatives second person imperatives. Most of the time we don't bother to call imperatives second person imperatives, but it just turns out later on you'll discover there are third person imperatives as well. They're more rare and you don't need to worry about them yet. There's nothing special at this stage about calling it a second person imperative. It's just to highlight that it's an instruction given to another person that you're speaking to. So there's a second example. Either you are keeping or keep the law. Okay, now let's take a look at this final example. This is one where we're going from English into Greek, a little bit more difficult, and it also highlights one useful little lesson about the imperative mood, which I want to ingrain just so you don't get confused about it. Now, let's just look at the sentence. Teach, plural, her, continuously. Well, that's what Duff has written down here. What on earth does he mean? Well, the continuously is the dead giveaway that the imperative verb, teach, is supposed to be translated into the present imperative, not the aorist imperative. Because you remember the difference between the present and the aorist imperatives is not one of time, but one of aspect, the state of completedness of the action, where the aorist is undefined, but the present denotes a continuous or ongoing or frequentative action. So what we want is an imperative. We want a present imperative. So let's just write down and recall what those are, just with the paradigm verb luo. We go lue, luete, luson, lusate. Present aorist. So we've got present is lue, luete for the singular and the plural. Just for completeness, you've got luson, lusate for the aorist. Okay, but it's not that. We want the present imperative. Now, do we want a singular or a plural? Well, what's really intriguing, Duff has written plural here in the question, so you think, okay, it's fairly obvious he wants you to use a plural imperative. If he had not written that, then you might have thought, if you were being a little careless, or just jumping to conclusions, I guess, that the her here being singular means that you want a singular imperative. Of course, you don't want a singular imperative because of this. There's no conflict between this being singular and this being plural. The imperative verb gets its number from the number of the person or the people who are being addressed by it. Nothing to do with what they're being asked to do. If you tell one person to feed 1,000 people, you need a singular verb because it's only one person that you're telling to feed them. Okay, so he's made it easy. He said teach her, but if you were trying to abstract from the situation in which you've been given the answer to a situation in which you had to figure out what to say, it would be useful just to have clarity that the number of the verb comes from the number of the people that you're instructing to do the thing, not from any other part of the sentence. Okay, so we want teach. Well, the verb I teach is didasco. So didasco. How do we make that into a plural imperative? Or we want to get rid of the O and replace it with ete. So didaskete. Didaskete means teach. You're telling a plural number of people to do this teaching. And her, well, you want the third person singular feminine pronoun. And you want it in the accusative case because it is the object of the teaching. And so we go autes, auter, auten, autes, auter, autai, autas, autain, autais, auter, auten, didaskete, auten, accusative, singular. So there you got it. Teach her continuously. Go on teaching her, you group of teachers. Didaskete, auten. Okay, that's enough of those examples for now. In practice 7.2, I suggest you carry on, crack on, do the rest of them, and give it 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, 5 or 6 days a week, and we will have you reading the New Testament in Greek in no time at all. God bless. Bye for now.